Meeting of the school committee on December 5th, 2023. I am standing in this evening for Mr. Hopcroft as chair, who had a commitment that he was not able to change this evening. So welcome, everyone. Can't believe we're in December already. Seeing as we have no one here for public comment, we will move right into the superintendent chair and student remarks. Dr. Hackett, we will start with you.
Thank you very much. I also cannot believe we are in December. And I don't have any real specific remarks tonight, so the students reps have any remarks? I yield my time.
Sure, we have one. So Winchester Gives Back is a program in which we collect donations for Winchester families in need over the holiday season. So Student Council has set up boxes at each of the 5 elementary schools. I think those will be up for the next about week and a half, and we're collecting hats and mittens and gloves. So please donate. It's very much appreciated. I think that's the only thing we have for now.
That was a very nice thing.
Does anybody have any questions for our students this evening? How are you guys feeling now that it's December? How's the building feeling? Full of energy and?
It's been flying by, but I think this is like the best time because I think December just feels like one big holiday. So all the students are like super happy.
Super happy.
That's
we're
great.
just trying to wrap stuff up as we near the new year, so but it's good.
Yes, I saw the email come out from Mr. Mahoney to the seniors, reminding people about college acceptances coming out soon and remembering that everyone follows different pathways, and I'm sure you guys will all be supportive of each other as that starts to roll in for them. I know it can be a stressful time of year for them, too.
Totally.
Good luck to them. And with that, we will forego, go right ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say a little shout out for the music program for those students who had auditioned for districts and who, yes. So,
Congratulations to them.
Congratulations
for making
to them.
districts.
That's right. Thank you for the effort.
Thank you. And with that, we will move on to the consent agenda. We have several items on the consent agenda tonight. We thank Winchester Foundation for Educational Excellence, the Winchester Elks, the John and Mary Murphy Educational Foundation, the Winchester Parent Faculty Association, who have all given considerable grants to Winchester High School and the Winchester Public Schools in this cycle. I am happy to take those as a single item, if anybody would like to.
Happy to make a motion.
Go right ahead, Mr. Nixon.
Prior to a motion, I'm going to ask that we pull from the vote November 14th minutes, and I had previously sent a minor edit on the October 24th minutes regarding
I was going to take
questions.
those separately since.
Oh, you want to?
Yeah,
Okay, so
I was
we
just
pull them
taking the
both.
gifts.
Forgive me.
That's okay. So can you second gifts for me?
I'll second.
Excellent. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. And go ahead, Mr. Nixon. We're pooling November 14th, and there was a minor edit on October 24th.
I had a minor edit on the October 24th minutes. There were a number of Lynch neighborhood property owners that had reached out to the town with questions about site circulation, site design, and lighting associated with the Lynch project. So those questions were reviewed with management. Management and the EFPBC separately provided answers for those, and we drew up a memo, which the chair got, and actually during that meeting, I think he either forwarded it to us or shared it through Google Docs. So I've suggested a couple of sentences just to provide a little more detail for that, and then would just ask that maybe Aaron or Karen, we could footnote that document in here now that the committee has it. But that was all. Other than that, they look fine. I would just ask that we hold on the 14th because I had some other edits there.
Absolutely. So approval of minutes of October 18th, 24th, and 26th. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
And the surplus of Lynch Elementary School furniture. Anything to pull out from that? Is everybody
So
okay?
move to surplus the equipment that has outlived its life that Mr. Marin has outlined for us.
Let's say well-loved.
I second that.
It was a well-lived life.
That's right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And with that, we will move into the report, update, and action items. for the first subcommittee update, Mr. Brady, would you like to share with us what the finance subcommittee, they had their first meeting?
Yeah, definitely. So we got together and we just laid out our process, the budget calendar, which I think this committee is very familiar with, and just talked a little bit about what the process would be, how we're going to collaborate with Finance Committee, and we'll be meeting the next few Thursdays in December, and then going from there and going into our January meetings as a school committee, where we'll be meeting most Tuesdays to discuss the budget. So if there are any thoughts anyone has on the budget that they'd like to bring to those subcommittee meetings, please let Tom or I know, or Frank, and we're happy to bring those up. If anyone has any ideas or things that they'd like to have discussed, you can definitely let us know.
Excellent. And do you know who your counterpart on the finance committee, who the leader of the education subcommittee will be this year?
Mr. Calabrese had
Yeah.
attended, so I believe he's going to be doing it again, which is great, because I know he did it last year, I believe, so.
Yeah, I think he sat on it with Mr. Miller last year.
Yep.
So, excellent. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Bolanese, do you have any?
Just a question?
Oh, go right
related
ahead.
to
Sorry,
that.
Mr. Nixon.
So I think it was around this time last year, FinCom released their FinCom handbook or town meeting guide or what have you. A lot of work went into that. There were some elements of that some of us might have taken some issue with, but it was a lot of work. They met with all the precincts. A year virtually has gone by. Do you know, Seamus, are they updating that this year, or was that like a one and done?
I don't know. That did not come up. I'm not sure.
It's a good question.
If there's a way to, maybe politely ask, if they're gonna do an update, I think it would be helpful for us to know that, and we might be in a better position to give them some information in advance. Maybe suggest some wordsmithing, if they're gonna present that to town meeting again.
I believe that was a project of Mr. Miller's, so he might be the best person to direct those questions.
I agree, Mr. Calabrese was a big part of that too, as I recall, as was Milan. I mean, it was, a lot of people contributed to that, and I don't want to undermine, I don't want to demean it, it was a lot of work. But I know there was some information in there that might have been presented a little bit differently,
Yep.
if I had my druthers, so I'm just curious to know. If
Yeah,
it's a one and done, then it's done.
And I think it's their document, so I think you could certainly make suggestions to them, but as I understand, it wasn't a collaborative effort between us and the Finance Committee. That was an internal document that they made, and then they wanted to share out.
It was. I would respectfully say in FY15, we did not hire 53 special education teachers. So that's one example. I may or may not have just received a heads up from someone that document may be updated in January. So
Okay.
Good to know.
perhaps that is something that Mr. Brady and Dr. Hackett can follow up on.
Good to know. And we have been, at the last finance subcommittee meeting, we have an item on the agenda to have whatever FinCom rep wants to be there to update the finance subcommittee, so it'd be a good opportunity for us to ask the question. Thursday, right? Yeah, Thursday.
Sure.
It's coming right up.
It's coming right up. It's coming right up.
It's always good to ask the question because you never know who's watching us on WinCam.
I do understand that.
One person or two.
Yeah. Mr. Calabrese did present to the Finance Committee last night, too, and had nice things to say about the transparency of the school committee with the Finance Committee in terms
Yep.
of establishing the budget. So I think they're open to a collaborative conversation.
Yep.
Ms. Bolanese, has the policy subcommittee met yet? And what have you been working on?
So policy subcommittee will be meeting either before the December winter break, or will be meeting in early January. And basically has just been busy in the background, working through the policy manual section by section, to see if it is aligned with the MASC policy manual, which has undergone numerous updates over the past year and a half.
Big project.
It's a big project.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you.
Yes, so we'll work through those.
And the curriculum subcommittee also met a few weeks ago now, and we got to hear from Ms. Kuhn, who shared with us about the new health and wellness standards that the state has released. And those came out just before the school year started. Typically, when we get that kind of information to work with as a district, it's nice when it comes in the spring, so the teachers have the summer to sort of do some work digesting the information and professional development around it. But given that we got it at the beginning of the school year, it's going to be a little bit slower process of how that's rolled out to teachers, probably in through next summer with a lot of that work. She was super excited about it, and lots of great changes. The last time they were updated was 1999, so it was definitely something that was due and that we are ready to tackle. We also heard a short update from Dr. Alanema on the 6th grade standards-based reporting pilot at the middle school, and that she talked a little bit about the work that has led up to that pilot and the background behind it, and that there would be more information coming out to parents around the first reporting period at the middle school, and that following the first reporting period, there would be opportunities for parents and students to give feedback on how the information is helping them and their experience sort of with the new reporting system there. So that is what we talked about at Curriculum Subcommittee. Any questions on any of those? Excellent. So our next item on our agenda would be the enrollment study update. So earlier this fall, the committee came to consensus on seeking an enrollment study with the Donahue Institute to help the district better predict our needs for enrollment over the next 3 years. We decided not to seek a larger scope at this time until we renew our facilities master plan, which we also have out on the horizon to do. And this scope was meant to be a little bit smaller of a scope to help us just plan for the next school year. And we had spoken actually in our finance subcommittee meetings last year. It came out in our discussions with the finance committee that everybody's really looking to get a handle on the enrollment, especially post-pandemic. And Mr. Hopcroft had also shared with town meeting this fall that we would be seeking this enrollment study. So Dr. Hackett, can you tell us how it's going with
Sure.
Donahue and what we can expect from the report?
Sure. So just to go back in time, it's hard to believe it's really just my third year, but if you recall, year one, we were coming out, my first year here, we were coming out of the remote hybrid situation, like every other school system around us and statewide and even nationally. We had seen a decline in enrollment during that period of time. And I do recall the first budget cycle that I was here for and went through, we talked a lot about the fact that we did not know what to expect with enrollment for the following year and preceding years. There was a lot of conversations, particularly around enrollment at the elementary level, class sizes, and the number of sections we were carrying. And we were, I think, very transparent with Finance Committee, the town meeting, across the board through that process. And I very much recall saying that we recognize that we may be potentially overstaffed going into that next fiscal year, which would have been last year? No, 2 years ago. And town meeting was very understanding about that. We were successful in passing that budget. And as we went through that school year, we started to see a little bit of bounce back happening, but not a ton. We went back through the budget process again for last year's budget, FY23 budget. And at town meeting, we actually, well, 22, we made some reductions to elementary class sections in recognition of the fact that where our enrollment was, where it was falling. We talked a lot about understanding that we don't have one K through 5 school, so it's not like we take all of our elementary kids and divide them by a number of teachers. every school is affected differently by who moves in, when they move in. We see bubbles that happen at times in one particular school that don't happen in other schools. So it's always difficult to get you really can't get a straight across the board equal distribution. But we always work to stay within and do stay within the class size guidelines that the school committee has established and have done so. As we've gone into this year, interestingly, we have seen a jump. And primarily that jump has been at the elementary level. We actually, in terms of our budgeted enrollment K through 12 versus what we actually have experiencing year to date, we are up about 105 students. So we have used historically the enrollment study that was done as part of the master facilities plan, although I think it was done and then I think it was
It was verified.
re-verified at some point by Donahue Institute, who is also used by the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which, so it lines up well with processes around Lynch, for example, or Morocco down the road, potentially. But what we saw for 2 years in a row was that we were off and not getting great numbers for our enrollment projections as we were building the budget. We have said publicly, you have all said certain times, I have said at town meeting, we have said at FinCom, we have talked about the fact that we really need, and we need to have an updated enrollment study. We talked, this committee talked about that in the context of a renewal or an updated master facilities plan. There was some conversation as we were going into the fall town meeting. The committee made the decision to not ask for any funding for either an enrollment demographic study, or for a master facilities plan. And the conversation still was, what can we do something within the current operating budget that would provide us good enrollment update that was not as comprehensive as an enrollment and demographic study, but would provide us what we have been saying we need, and I believe, the superintendent, we do need to see whether or not we need to make some adjustments in the ratios that we use to roll students forward from year to year. So, for example, kindergarten is always a little bit of a wild card, but we're at about 300 students now in kindergarten. That's up from about 260 from 2 years ago, so that's pretty significant. So whether that's new families coming in, whether that's families who are here, who are now trusting that we're not going to go into a shutdown and remote, who are now sending their children to kindergarten here, that's not entirely clear. We also are seeing the usual bumps that we have seen and historically seen with grade 1, a little bit of an influx in grade 1, a little bit of an influx in grade 2, where some families make the decision to stay with a private situation for those early elementary years, and then they re-enroll. But we're seeing a greater jump than we have in the past. So luckily, the distribution of that 100 or so students that we budget to actual projection, or budget to actual numbers as of right now, we have been able to absorb, partially because luckily the distribution has been fairly even. Although we are pushing on, at VO, for example, we are absolutely on the top end of our class size guidelines for grade 2 and for grade 4, which is problematic for all kinds of reasons, not the least of which we don't have any classroom space at VO. However, that also, I think, is just an indication that we really need to see what is going on. Can an enrollment study for this upcoming FY25 budget development give us numbers that are potentially more reliable, taking into account the housing developments that are in the pipeline, that are already out of the ground, that are starting to even take in applications. We know there's a lot of that going on, but also just in terms of just the overall picture for what is being experienced by us and others from kind of the COVID bounce back, and whether or not we should be expecting our numbers to continue to grow over the next several years. So because we did not move forward on a full-blown enrollment and demographic study, which would have likely been tens of thousands of dollars, and we didn't ask for that money at fall town meeting, we were able to, find the money in the budget to at least do what we're calling Phase 1 enrollment study. Phase 1 gives us, and it is with the Donahue Institute, will give us a projection. I've asked for it by the end of December. They're pushing hard to get it to us. I'm hopeful that they will be able to get it to us by the end of December, but they have locked in a date of January 15th, which still gives us enough time to make any kind of adjustments that we might need to make from a budget perspective before you actually just vote on a recommended budget that goes to the town. From that point, the focus really is FY '25 budget development, although it gives us a picture into what future years would look like. But I know that from a timeline standpoint, I think it would be for consideration. The committee might want to consider the Springtown meeting in asking for some funding for a more comprehensive or additional phases of this study to allow us to go deeper into some of the demographic information that you would, and would expect, and you have had in years prior years in preparation for the master facilities plan. So that's what this does. I think it's really important. I think it's important for a lot of reasons, not the least of which is we're also still juggling the Lynch at Parkhurst challenge. And we also want to make sure, particularly for kindergarten, as you know, we have right now, we've only been able to schedule one kindergarten at Parkhurst because we don't have enough classrooms to do more than one. That has had an effect on Lincoln specifically, because Lincoln is carrying one additional kindergarten this year for Lynch students, but we also have Lynch students who are in the kindergarten mix at Lincoln, because we've not been able to have them. We've maxed out at Parker's with 21 students. So that's kind of encapsulates the intent, the need, and we believe it's important. So happy to answer any questions. If anyone has any. Before I answer any questions, I'm going to take a drink of water.
Mr. Nixon?
Sure.
You're
Dr.
making
Hackett
that-
and I had a conversation about this earlier today. I want to say a couple of things. I think very highly of the UMass Donahue Institute. They were very helpful to us when we last did our 10-year enrollment demographic study. That was sort of a gut check on the master plan. My memory from that workshop we had in September was that we were on board with the idea of pulling the enrollment demographic study out of the 10-year facility master plan, because while you can do them concurrently, you don't have to. And it would be great to actually have that study done, because you could effectively post it really with the RFP for your master plan. And then you have interested parties who will be able to learn a lot about Winchester. And of course, there's great value in that as well to administration through the budget planning process. I do not have a memory of us deciding that we were going to limit this to just 2 years. I think I personally became aware of that when I saw this attached to the agenda. I think the reasons that Dr. Hackett just described for the short-term importance around budget planning make all the sense in the world. So I do think if we go this route, which I'm okay with, I do think it's important that we recognize this as sort of phase one. If we go this route, it effectively precludes us from, asking for money in the spring for the master plan. I mean, we would basically want to ask for money for phase two for this. Not a bad thing. River Street, we presume, would be fully occupied, near it anyway. Folks will be moving into Cambridge. By the way, families have now actually moved into River Street, which is exciting. We don't know if they have kids yet. We won't know that till they fill out their paperwork to get a sticker for the dump. So that's starting to
We'll
happen.
know.
Actually, we'll know. They'll register for school.
Well, if the kids are old enough.
Right.
But I think what I'm interested in is, are there any 2.9, 3.9-year-old kids that are suddenly going to show up on the radar, a year later for kindergarten or what have you? So I think the message that, good timing, the message Mr. Hopcroft and I actually were both delivering to town meeting was, we're getting started on this exercise. the EFPBC specifically said, we can't wait to join the school committee in seeking funding for an updated master plan, perhaps as early as the spring, but certainly no later than the fall. So I feel like if we're going to do this two-step approach, which sounds like we're doing, this would suggest an ask in the spring for some money for phase two. And if we go that route, I think it's really important that the finance committee and town meeting understand that the district took on this first step on its own in terms of funding. And there are a number of examples where we've been doing a lot of that lately, throwing ESSER money, for example, towards McCall and facility stuff. So I'm on board with this, but the last time they worked with us, and it was for a little less money than this, but it was granted 6 years ago, so costs were different. We had a pretty detailed work plan and engaged quite a few stakeholders in town. So it'd be good to know if that's really the plan for the spring, and we can kind of maybe develop a work plan, find out what information we have, and confirm what we don't, and then perhaps let Donahue kind of react to that and tell us what they could do with it. But I'm on board. You're not looking for a vote, right?
Nope.
No.
Yeah.
No, and actually, Mr. Nixon, we talked about a larger scope and going to this town meeting with a warrant article for a larger scope to the enrollment and a master plan. And the consensus of this committee, including Mr. Brady, had put forward a motion to do that, was resoundingly not a consensus of this committee for this spring town meeting. So or for fall town meeting. So that's what, just this fall, we had a meeting about that. So, that you attended. So,
If you can point me to the minutes for that meeting, I would appreciate it.
yep. Because I had
I am unable
suggested
to
it,
find
and
them.
I believe Mr. Brady even made a motion to do so, so.
Regardless,
But I support the
this
first
is
step.
phase one. The intent is the same, and we recognize that because we did not get funding at fall town meeting, did not request funding for fall town meeting, it did not take away the need for us to get going on
Right.
enrollment study, very much for the purposes of the budget. So this is a start, and presumably, given the reputation of the Donahue Institute, the committee would be interested in continuing conversations with them for future scope, including a more comprehensive demographic study, and how that gets mapped out and who is involved and kind of what would the scope be, what kind of information we're looking for, and having conversations with them further. We have time to do it, so.
Related to this, only somewhat related to this, I thought the select board had made a decision on what the fees were going to be for the transfer station. I thought I read that somewhere, but I heard today that that either isn't the case or might be up in the air. If that's the case, it will delay the clerk sending out the census paperwork. As we all know, you get your paperwork and you have to write a check to get your sticker for the dump. So typically those will go out the first week of January. They ask residents to return those within 10 days, but it might get delayed this year by a couple of weeks if transfer station is back in the discussion. I'm just mentioning that because if you're going to get something from Donahue mid-January, it may not be till after we vote the budget that, we get something from the clerk's office.
It's just either ironic or very interesting that we really, our enrollment study and understanding of students who's going to move into towns based on dump stickers. I just think that that's an interesting connection.
It's an interesting piece of leverage to hold
It's-
over
it
people's
really
heads,
is.
isn't it?
It really is.
I'd be curious to know how many residents are still using the dump and buying the dump stickers, what percentage, and what percentage are now using private haulers and not returning those forms too. Because the town may need to use a different incentive to get people to turn them in if they're not, if only 50% of the town is buying a dump sticker, then that's not going to be great census data for us either.
So maybe to follow the district's lead, if you write a check early enough for your bus pass for your kids, you get a little bit of a discount.
That's right. We got to get them one way or another, Mr. Nixon.
Idea.
Right.
Are there any other questions about the enrollment study? We look forward to seeing the data from that, Dr. Hackett. It's hopefully going to be really useful to us in helping us plan. And even if we don't get it till late January, at least we will have it before Springtown meeting when the budget's voted. So there will hopefully still be some flexibility to make some changes if we need to.
Agreed.
I think it's great that, because you have, just as you were saying, Dr. Hackett, that you've been talking about doing a study of this sort since you came, so that we can better understand the impact since the pandemic on our enrollment. I think it's great that we have this chance to use this as a baseline going forward.
Agreed. I think the timing is good. I think last year would have been too soon, year before that would have been too soon, but I think we're starting
Yeah,
to see
a few
some
years.
stuff happening now that we just need to figure out whether there's some trends going on, so,
Yep.
thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hopcroft, I'm happy to hand it back to you for the Lynch report, or I can just finish it out for you. Which would you like?
Finish it out. Only one item left.
So we have one item left on the agenda this evening. Yesterday, the EFPBC met, and I believe they selected a bidder for a bid package for Lynch Elementary School. And I also think, Dr. Hackett, Mr. Nixon, you probably have some good news to share with the committee about that process.
And you can read all about it at lynch2025.com. I always
Hashtag.
So you want to bring it up? Bring up lynch2025.com.
Do it.
Are you, who's making this presentation?
I
thought it
think
was
it's,
Frank.
I think it's really more of an update than a full-blown presentation. I think there's certainly
was
good
gonna
news
say.
to share, and as a co-chair of the FPBC, I certainly would yield to you to cover it. If not, I can give a general overview, but
I
either
went
way,
there for
the news is
breaking
very
news.
good.
Yeah.
Well, so you all will remember, and it's still there, if you go to the project costs page on the website, you'll find that our construction cost estimate for budget purposes for the new Lynch was $65.4 million. That was for the new building. But our community really wanted to know what the new building was going to cost, separate from the abatement and demolition of the existing. So that's 2.3. So you add those together, and you get 65.7. So if we think, that's the work that like a general contractor would be responsible for. So to abate the old building of hazardous materials, take it down, and then build us a new building, under the general contractor contract, it's 65.7. Anyway, their bid was sufficiently under that. I'll pull it up here real quick. So 65.4, and then the 2.3 for the demolition. Their bid was over $1 million under that for base scope. There were 4 ad alternates, you all may remember, on this project. The first ad, and they all have to do with solar. So the first ad alternate was for the safety rails around the perimeter of the roof. Those are only required if you're going to fill a roof with solar panels, because now you're pushing maintenance staff to walk along the edge of the roof. So the Brait's bid for ad alternate 1 came in sufficiently under that their base bid plus alternate 1 was still below our estimate. Ad alternate 2 was the excavation, the trenching, the conduit for the ground-mounted solar canopies. No wiring or anything, but just to sort of get that in the ground. That was number 2. Their bid also came in pretty competitive. And then ad alternate number 3 was the actual concrete foundations for future ground-mounted solar canopies on the site. And to remind everybody, our approach there was that if the bids were going to come in higher, if we had any chance of using project funds to get infrastructure into the ground before we build a parking lot, that is what you want to do. Because otherwise, you build a parking lot, and then months later, somebody comes along under a separate contract and they cut up the parking lot. So we didn't want to do that. So ad alternates 1, 2, and 3, we were able to afford with the construction cost estimate that we had going into the project. We had a little money left over for ad alternate 4, which is the big one. I think their bid was around $1.8, $1.9 million for that. That's for the actual solar panels on the roof and the steel ground-mounted canopies. We did not have enough money to pick that up in its entirety, but you remember town meeting approved Article 18, and that was an authorization for funding. It was $300,000 in free cash, plus an additional borrowing up to, I think, 3.5,
yeah.
something like that, if necessary. So the committee felt it was close enough that if management would just make that journal entry and give us the $300,000 in free cash, we could make up the difference, because we have a pretty healthy contingency on the project. So that's what we voted to do. So We'll be able to get all the solar on the project. We are going to use the free cash, but there's no secondary, supplemental borrowing, and the website says so. And if anybody wants to know why we chose this route, you can click on that link, and Maeve is here, I think, behind the closet doors in the corner, but a shout out to Maeve and WinCam who put that little video together for us for the website, so you go right from 18 into the debate on 19.
And Mr. Hopcroft, what does that mean Lynch is going to be?
Net zero. Thank you, and the town doesn't have to spend the extra 3.5 million borrowing.
Exactly. So I think that is good news, I think, for the town. It's exciting that Lynch will be able to open as a net zero building.
The next two big risks for the project really are just getting through the abatement and demolition phase. We went way over budget with that on VO because we found some things that we didn't think were going to be there. And then just getting out of the ground, because this is Winchester and you can't dig a hole without hitting water
Something.
or something that had to do with a tannery once upon a time or something. So everybody will really breathe a sigh of relief when we have foundations in.
When are we breaking ground, Mr. Nixon?
So that's a conversation that we will have with Mr. Marin and Dr. Hackett in terms of a groundbreaking ceremony. It has been suggested, there's no urgency to do it right now. When we did it for VO, we really made an effort to include the school community in that. The kids, the music teacher actually wrote a song with the kids that was fantastic.
I perhaps have it on
But
video.
when we had the groundbreaking, Karen will remember, when we had the groundbreaking, the old school was gone. So there are contracts to be signed, there's permits to be pulled for abatement, so there's no building coming down in December. The abatement work we expect will start in January, maybe February. Old Lynch is coming down. So perhaps something in early spring. If we had to have a ceremony and include the school community, I think we should just give them time to be a part of that. And if we're going to do it sooner rather than later, we should bring snow shovels.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it'd be good to do it in the spring.
VO was in the spring. They were wearing light fleece jackets. I remember what my kid was wearing.
And you have it on video.
And I have it on video.
Mr. Hopcroft,
Do
you
you
want
want to pull it up?
I have the pictures. I probably do have it.
Mr. Nixon, I was curious, because I do worry about risks and the abatement risk and the literal skeletons that could be underground that we may encounter. I know we have contingencies built into the project, which you were using a little bit of that, it sounds like, for the solar. How comfortable is the FPBC on the sufficiency of the contingencies for the likely surprises that might come along?
We're comfortable. We carried a large contingency in particular because of our, concerns about the site generally. It's very close to, as we know, Horn Pond. There's actually, I think it's a PFAS plume, so those are the forever chemicals. So DEP is aware of some groundwater contamination. Nothing on our site, but it's, not far away. It's always a chance you're digging, you find something. We've done a tremendous amount of geotech so far. We haven't pulled up anything. All those cores have gone to a lab for sampling, but there's always the potential, something could happen. And as you all remember, there was a well field there. Now it was for drinking water, but right near the brook as well. So I think the committee just felt we wanted to be pretty conservative with the contingency. So we're still holding over a 9% contingency after project award. There are there have been a couple of bid protests that. Well, there were actually 4. I think we resolved 2 or 3 of them through the Attorney General's office last month. This happens from time to time. One is, as of yet, unresolved and, could impact the project to the tune of 6 figures, but it would be a small 6 figures. And we're hopeful that it will go away. So at the end of the day, it's great. We have a project and we're going to be able to do solar. We may have to keep chipping away at the contingency a little bit. But the committee, I think, feels pretty comfortable with it. There are actually, in addition to this, there are a couple of sort of extra items that we're looking to do up at the Parkhurst School as well, because that project also came in a little under budget. So we're looking to add snow guards on the roof over the cathegematorium. When the VO kids were there, we had a particularly heavy snowfall, followed by some warm weather. And that just went, it just came off right in one sheet. There were no kids down there, but today we do have kids down on the blacktop. So we're looking to add that, and waiting on a proposal from the contractor. The EFPBC has already authorized the funding for it, because we feel like we can afford to do that. So that's good.
And that's a separate budget? Or is that part of the Lynch?
So it's all part of the overall project budget, but there is detailed breakdown if you want to see how that folds into the overall project cost of 94.5. You can read all about it at lynch2025.com. The other thing I will tell you is that we are waiting, it may be another 2 to 2.5 months before we get confirmation from the MSBA on what consequence the board's vote in October is going to mean to us in terms of raising the construction cost cap for reimbursement. So I think we've talked about that at least a little bit. That's welcome news. We don't know what the consequence of that is until the schedule of values can be completed on the project, the contract is awarded, and the team in Boston can kind of review everything. They have almost 40 projects that were impacted by this. So our OPM was told actually last week it could take a couple of months. But you know, when it happens, it'll be good because it's going to mean, in the aggregate, a little less long-term borrowing for us. So we'll share that when we know what it is.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee about solar Lynch? Thank you. Appreciate that. That's always good to hear good news about a new building project. So our next meetings are December 12th. That is going to be a workshop meeting. And then I cannot believe it, but January 9th, 2024 will be our first meeting of the new year. The next thing that we have on the agenda is an executive session. So we are going to adjourn to executive session for the purpose of conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel. We will return to public session following that executive session for item 8 on our agenda, and we will adjourn from there. So
Just to remind the committee, Mr. Marin and I have a meeting with our auditor in 15 minutes, so I'm not sure if I'll be with you for that. And can I ask for the meeting on the 12th? Is there a time for that, or is that still TBA?
believe it's still TBA, is that correct? Yeah.
What's that?
TBD, we're hoping to start at 5 if people can do that.
5, okay.
Thank you to our acting chair for running such an efficient meeting that maybe we can have Chris and Andrew participate in if we do the executive session just as quickly.
I just need a vote.
Motion to
So
go to
moved.
executive for the
Second.
reasons stated.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned to executive session.
Going to A110.
So I'd like to call the public session of the Winchester School Committee back to order at 7:58. And is there a motion to consider on the
I
side
would
letter?
move that we accept a side letter of agreement with Dr. Hackett to adjust his salary for the 2023-24 school year to $242,000, and that is effective July 1st, 2023.
Second.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 And so we have a unanimous vote. Mr. Nixon was generally supportive, but not able to be here because he is needed, because he is the quorum on another committee tonight. So otherwise would be here, but it's unanimous of those who are here, and we do have a quorum, so congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
And I'd just like to add that this is, thank you for your patience. This usually happens closer to the July 1st date when this becomes effective, and I know we were in the middle of a lot of
No, not a problem
business
at all.
at that time, so we really appreciate the work you've been doing with the school district and hope that, you know, this adjustment is reflective of that work and your continued time with us here.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Excellent. So
Motion to adjourn?
is there a second?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned at 7:59. That's a new record. Thank you. Thank you, WinCam.